Hello, my name is Curci, and this is a brand new episode of We Talk, recapping E3 2014 that just recently wrapped up. I'm going to go through all the press conferences, plus I think about two things that happened after the press conferences, and just basically going over some of the things that interested me. So this may not be everything that happened at E3, otherwise we'd be here forever. I'm not going to say every game that was announced, just some of the things that I thought stood out, and some opinions that I may have on some of those things. So, it all started off with Microsoft's press conference, Phil Spencer coming out talking games, to which I'm like, yes. And he didn't lie. The entire press conference was all games, except for one moment, but we'll get to that at the end of the Microsoft press conference. Phil Spencer, by the way, did a great job with this press conference. He came out there very humble. I talked about this with Greg from the Game Boat. He was saying things like, we get your feedback, we are listening to you, and we're better for it. So it's like, we recognize that we've made mistakes, and now we're trying to focus on what makes this entire industry great. And what is the bread and butter of the Xbox, which is games and gamers. And, you know, the original Xbox built itself on games and gamers. So the fact that the Xbox One last year at E3 was sort of alienating gamers by talking about TV and all the assets that don't involve gaming exactly. Now Phil Spencer's like, look, we made a mistake. Now we're going to be putting games at the forefront, and that's exactly what they did. Kicking it all off with Call of Duty Advanced Warfare gameplay. It wasn't multiplayer because Activision likes to have their own reveal event for multiplayer, which is something that's weird. I never really liked that they always did that, but from what we saw from the gameplay, it looks good. Like, it looks fun. None of the guns have kickback. There's some double jumping. I had this weird inkling about the, when I was watching the gameplay, was that I kept seeing, like, shades of Titanfall. And it was weird because we looked at Titanfall, we kept seeing shades of Call of Duty. Now we're looking at this new Call of Duty and seeing shades of Titanfall. You know, everybody's like, you know, they wanted more, like they wanted more things that were different out of it. They were like, it's still the same old aiming down the sights and shooting the bad guys. I'm like, yeah, but isn't that what a first-person shooter is? I mean, like, you don't want to change first-person shooters so much that it doesn't feel like a first-person shooter. I mean, Call of Duty is one of the most profitable entertainments out there, and it's not going to change the core mechanic of, you know, the core concept of what it is. I mean, like, I like that they're being innovative. Like, they're going a lot more sci-fi. Call of Duty has gone sci-fi before with Black Ops 2, a game that I love. Some people may think differently, but, you know, this one seems to be, in my opinion, a lot more in terms of sci-fi. Like, we actually have laser guns. They have a lot of double jumping. It seems like everybody has, like, this, like, suit, like this, it's sort of like, it reminds me of, like, the exoskeleton from Elysium. And they're all, like, really strong. Like, they're able to rip the car doors off of cars and stuff. And I'm like, that looks really cool. And, you know, the only thing that was weird about the gameplay was that, you know, you have, like, this, like, swarm of drones. And I'm like, wouldn't all the drones be crashing into each other? Why did they have to travel like that? Like, wouldn't they just act like a more spread out, more spaced out, just sort of, like, cover, sort of? Not so much like a swarm from the Matrix. I'm like, that looked a little weird. And, of course, all of that has content exclusivity with Microsoft, so people with the Xbox will get DLC, I assume a month sooner, because that's what it always has been. They would move on to Evolve, and saying that the beta and DLC content will be available for the Xbox. And I'm like, that was cool. I didn't expect Evolve to actually go ahead and do that, but apparently Microsoft locking down a lot of the exclusives. They showed off the Kraken, which is the new monster type, and then we would actually see some gameplay with the previously new hunters that were announced a while ago, and they also released the Kraken, or not, released the Kraken, get it? They revealed the Kraken actually in action. Like, the Kraken's able to, like, float and stuff, and it's more like range, not so much like in your face like the Goliath was. And I like seeing these new hunters. And then IGN was actually the one, the people I were watching throughout all of E3, so all my information is coming directly from them. And they asked the question of how many game modes, how many maps, how many hunters, how many monsters are you going to have? And they said 3 monsters, 12 hunters, and over a dozen maps. And I'm like my mind was blown. But not so much blown, but I was like, I didn't expect it to be that much. Like, I expected they were going to be like, you know, oh, we have, like, you know, about 6 maps and, You know, I was, for whatever reason, I expected 3 monsters, and I thought that was all the hunters we were going to get. I didn't know we were going to get another 4. So I was very happy to hear all the information that I saw about Evolve, and I think Evolve is definitely one of the most anticipated games that are going to be coming up soon. And then we got to the Assassin's Creed Unity gameplay, and it basically showed off co-op. Now, I will say, from the gameplay that was shown, by the way, Assassin's Creed apparently also getting some exclusivity with the Xbox, which was surprising to me. Usually Assassin's Creed is very much a, they get a lot of exclusives with the PlayStation and Sony and all that. But the gameplay that we've seen at the Microsoft press conference showed off the new co-op mode, which is apparently the new focus, like sort of how the ability to call in assassins was for Brotherhood and the way the naval combat was for Black Flag. Co-op is now for Unity. Like, it's not so much like in Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag where there was like a multiplayer mode where it's called Wolfpack, and I think it's called Wolfpack, I don't actually remember, where all you're really doing is just killing some generic NPCs, and that sort of like cooperative play wasn't really cooperative play that I feel like Assassin's Creed deserved. And this kind of cooperative play definitely seems kind of cool, and it looks like some of the movements, like the parkouring and the free running, is a lot more smoother. But again, we're going to get a little bit more into Assassin's Creed when we talk about Ubisoft today. I got a bone to pick with that. They showed up The Division, another game I didn't expect to see. Also, DLC exclusives with Microsoft. Microsoft nailing down the exclusives of third-party games. And we would later see, well, first of all, the gameplay, not really showing anything new in terms of mechanics and anything, but they are bringing back, I think it was the same crew from the initial demo back at last year's E3. And it's basically like, last year's E3 seemed like the gameplay was a lot more controlled, like they were able to control the situation. This one, like, it's showing like how NPCs can cause like situations that, like, you know, aren't able to be controlled. For example, like, you know, they're all panicking because all the enemies are like sort of like going around and surrounding them, and they're like losing control of the situation, which is definitely cool because I like that. It forces you to adapt, and I like this. You know, they're trying to, it's sort of like an MMO, but it's not really an MMO, but there are some RPG elements to this. They would talk more about The Division afterwards, but what during the Ubisoft press conference, they showed this cinematic trailer, and basically what it was like you seeing things in the environment, and they're being moved around, but you don't see people, and the entire time you're hearing this voiceover of, like, I think it's a woman, or it could be a dude. I don't actually remember. I haven't seen it. Like, I was back at the Ubisoft press conference. I was back on Monday, and I'm filming this on Saturday. So the fact is just like there's somebody, a parent is like comforting their child who's coughing, and they're like almost like you only hear this. This is only audio, and they're basically like crying because they know that their kid is like dying. And I'm like, the feels. And it's just like, you know, the atmosphere that the game creates. Like, it's not so much a story trailer, but it's like setting the setting of like there's this epidemic that hit New York City, and everybody is screwed, and people are dying, and it's horrible. And on top of that, like at the end of the trailer, you don't see anybody, but you could tell that there's a scuffle going on, and then there's like blood dripping, but again, you don't see anybody, and the voiceover is like, everybody sort of turned like a blind eye to what was really going on. And I'm like, I get it, because they can't see anybody, but they know stuff's going on, but they're not addressing it. I'm like, the voiceover works so well with what they're showing. And then the guy who's like one of the characters that they showed during the gameplay demo, like, reaches his hand out and picks the guy up, and the guy's all bloody and stuff, and I was like, oh god, that cinematic trailer, it hit me where it was supposed to hit me. The feels were real, and man, that game is going to be awesome. So I'm super excited with The Division. Continuing with the Microsoft press conference, they showed off a Dragon Age Inquisition gameplay trailer. Again, we're going to talk about Dragon Age Inquisition when it comes time for EA's press conference. But basically, showing some gameplay elements, but also like showing some like cinematic elements. Cutscenes, rather. I keep saying, if I say cinematics, I'm not saying CGI, I'm saying it's a cutscene, what I assume is in-game. And not really showing too much, but again, we will see more about Dragon Age later. Then we get to The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. We show you some gameplay, as well as a trailer. They're showing like a tracking of like a griffin, and some of the cool like tools that the character will have, or the player will have at their disposal when tracking some of these monsters, and RPG elements. Like, I'm so surprised that The Witcher 3 has gone so much under my radar. Like, we've seen it last year at E3. We've seen some information since then. And now at this year's E3, it was like, how did I not know? Like, how did I not really pay attention to this game? It's like a free-roaming fantasy setting RPG that's straight up my alley. How did I not get interested in this? So we would see more gameplay. Actually, it would be a Fallout, or not really Fallout, that was the word that they used. It would be a continuation of the gameplay that was shown during the press conference later on, after the press conference, and we would get more details about like how the world is like its own like living, breathing thing. How you're of course, because it's like a big open world, they're like, hey, you see that mountain? You can actually go to that mountain, and I'm like, all right, that's cool. You know, the graphics, it looks beautiful, like it looks smooth, and it looks like it could be like a lot of fun. You could lose yourself in it, and I think they said about like 50 hours. I think that's what they said. But man, oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man, is that game awesome looking, and I'm super excited for The Witcher 3. A game that has gone well, not really so much under the radar, but I felt like it was overhyped, was Sunset Overdrive. We saw an awesome trailer at the Microsoft press conference where one of this character was breaking the fourth wall. It was very entertaining, and then they went right into the gameplay of like some of the cool things you could do in the game, and I'm like, huh, this game looks cool. Like, for whatever reason, like, I think it was like the goofiness of it was like really kind of putting me off, and I'm like, oh, it's like Dead Rising 3, or Dead Rising rather, not so much Dead Rising 3, but I'm like, it's just like the world is covered in enemies, and you now have to like go and kill the enemies just because it's fun to kill enemies, and I'm like, yeah, it's like Dead Rising. I mean, like, there's zombies everywhere, and you gotta go kill the zombies that are everywhere, and I'm like, I don't really see the benefit of like this game. But then, like, the more I saw of it, we would see more gameplay, some details in the multiplayer after the press conference, and I'm like, maybe I could get behind this game. But I'm like, this game is built and created to be fun. Like, you have like this big explosion and the word boom in like the cloud, and I'm like, yeah, this game is meant to be fun. Like, you play it to have fun, and that's the whole point. So I was like, now I'm going to start paying attention to this game, because now I get what they're... Like, I feel like a lot of people already knew that, but for whatever reason, it took a while for it to actually click with me, and I'm like, yeah, this game actually looks good. Like, I'll give it a try when it comes out. So, then, they go into another thing. First of all the press conferences, well, not all the press conferences, but Microsoft and Sony both have their own section for indie games. They led into the indie games with Inside, which was created by the developers of Limbo. And Limbo, one of my more favorite games ever. I don't know if it's a sequel to Limbo. I don't know if it's like even in the same universe as Limbo. But again, it has like a really cool art style to it. It looks like the smoothness of Limbo is looking like it has an influence with the smoothness that is inside. Get it? Inside. Alright, I'll stop. But, no, I'm really excited for Inside because I love Limbo, and I have full faith in the developers that they're going to create another awesome piece of work. And then they showed off, or rather announced, Rise of the Tomb Raider, which is sequel to Tomb Raider, and I loved Tomb Raider. I actually played it twice. I played it on the 360, and then when it came out for the Definitive Edition for the Xbox One, I went and played it again. So that game was awesome. I thought their story was incredible, and I'm really excited for Rise of the Tomb Raider. The only thing I didn't like about Tomb Raider was its multiplayer, and I think some people are still amazed that I was able to get in achievements, considering how dead the Tomb Raider multiplayer is. And then it didn't all wrap up, but that's the way I have it written down. This was sort of like in the middle of the press conference. None of this stuff is going to happen in chronological order. I'm like writing it up in like ways that like I want to talk about this first and I want to talk about this first, but I was going to save this for last for the Microsoft press conference. The Halo Master Chief Collection. This thing is a super game. It is a super game. It's amazing. It's $60. They didn't say it during the press conference, but they said it later on. This game includes 4 games. It includes Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary. The whole anniversary treatment is being given to Halo 2. Halo 3 is included as well as Halo 4. So that's 4 games. Included in all those games are the multiplayers, untouched multiplayers, all with their in-game engines, their own engines. And it's like, we saw a multiplayer demo for Assassin's Creed, for Halo 2 Anniversary, and I was like, that looks cool. Like, they're bringing back all the multiplayers. Over 100 multiplayer maps, all running at 1080p at 60 frames a second. It's exactly what everybody wants to hear. You have 4 games, 2 of them are getting an HD remake. 2 of them are HD remakes, not getting an HD remake, because Combat Evolved Anniversary already was out for like 3 years. But this is all coming out in, I believe, the fall. In addition to all of that, they're getting the live-action Halo series called Nightfall. This is currently being filmed, and that is going to be building up to the events that are going to occur in Halo 5. So that gets included into the collection, as well as the access to the Halo 5 Guardians beta that opens in December. And I'm like, so let me get this straight. For the price of one game, we are getting 4 games. 2 of them are an HD remake. All of them have their untouched multiplayers, all with their own engines, all running at 1080p at 60 frames a second. Included in all of that is a live-action series that is going to build up to the events of the next game, and a beta code to the next game. All for $60. This is a super game, and it's all going on to the Xbox One, which I was like, there's no way, as I was watching this press conference, that it was going to be less than $100. I was like, there's no frigging way. And then they said it. I talked to Greg, and he said, "Oh yeah, they said it during an interview. They were like, oh, we just forgot to say it, but it's $60." And I was like, how do you forget to say that? That's amazing. So that was Microsoft's press conference. Overall, that was a fantastic press conference because they went out, they talked about games nonstop. The only time they didn't talk about games was when they talked about Nightfall, and they didn't even spend too much time on that. And God, man, it was what Microsoft needed. Because like I said early on, is that Microsoft realizes, or rather Phil Spencer realizes, that the bread is buttered with gamers. That's how the Xbox got its start. That's how the 360 got its start. And it's how the Xbox One misstepped. Like, it was alienating gamers, which is not what you're supposed to do. So, the fact that they came back, they rebounded, and they said, you know what, we're going to go games all the way through. And they did that. So, I have nothing really bad about Microsoft at all. I really can't think of anything bad about their press conference. Going on to EA's press conference, I'm laughing because this is going to be fun. I'm going to rip these guys apart. They started with Battlefront. They showed off some early in-engine footage. They were showing off models. They were showing off how they were actually going to where the movies were filmed, get some inspiration. They wanted the game to feel authentic, and I like that. I like that they're at least showing that they care enough to create a game that looks like it belongs into the cinematic universe that is Star Wars. So I liked what I saw. I was secretly hoping, not really secretly because I made a video that said I was hoping that this would happen, but I was hoping that we would see some Battlefront gameplay, realizing that how unrealistic that was. This game is very early in development. It's only been in development for about a year, but the fact of the matter is just like, I'm glad we saw what we saw. We were lucky that we saw what we saw. They didn't even have to address Battlefront at all. I think that they should have. I'm glad that they did. And I think that it was good. I mean, a lot of people were like, oh man, they didn't show any gameplay. And I'm like, yeah, but the fact is that it's too early to show gameplay. Let them take their time to make this game the way it should be. Another thing is like how good it looked. Like, I was like, that game looks really good. But then I keep thinking to myself, like, with the grand scale that DICE likes to make their games, and the grand scale that Battlefront should be at, I don't feel like the quality that we saw and the in-engine footage was quite what I think is going to make it into the game. Like, I don't think it's going to look that good in the final product. Like, a lot of times, developers will have to make compromises when they're making their games. Like, they're going to compromise quality in favor of functionality. If your game looks great but doesn't play right, like it's broken, nobody's going to buy it. But if it plays smooth and it doesn't look, I don't want to say it looks bad, but it doesn't look like incredible. If it still looks like acceptable, then people are going to play it because it's all about the experience. People put way too much value in graphics these days. Like, graphics look good. I mean, like, graphics are not a bad thing, and they only improve the experience. But I think people are like over with the PlayStation 4. They're like, yeah, but can the Xbox run at 1080p at 60 frames a second? And I'm like, yeah, but does it matter? Because first of all, you can't even detect with your human eye the difference between 720p and 1080p unless it's on like an enormous screen, which I'm assuming that the PC Master Race definitely has, and they're not arguing with anybody. Well, they're arguing with everybody actually. But the fact of the matter is just like, you know, quality is not as important in gaming as functionality, and I think that's going to eventually play. I mean, I'd like to be wrong. I would love to be wrong, where like if the game looks that good in the final product, awesome. But I don't know if it will be. But again, it's too early to tell. Then we go into BioWare. They started showing off Dragon Age Inquisition. They gave us some more details. They showed us a lot more of some of the characters, giving us a heroic trailer, I think they said. And it was giving us some introductions to characters that we had not met before. and showing off some gameplay. They were fighting a dragon, and they talked about later on. They showed an extended version of that gameplay. They gave details. The game's gonna have mounts. They're bringing back the tactical view that was in the PC version of Origins, and I think a lot of people were upset that it wasn't in Dragon Age 2. They're bringing it back, and it's definitely, like, I don't know if I'll use it because I've never actually used it, because I'm kind of liking the traditional, the camera behind the character thing, but I will definitely give it a try, like, put the camera over top and have, like, a little tactical view. The scale of the world seems to be increased. Like, they're saying how, like, this is going to be bigger than anything we have seen before in terms of the Dragon Age game. And the attention to detail is really awesome. Like, I love how they're, like, talking about how they're paying attention to a lot of the things that they hadn't before. And, of course, the story is amazing. I mean, I always liked BioWare and their ability to storytell. But the combat seems to be improved. Like, it's still, like, that same, like, well, hotkey certain spells first on your, you know, on the buttons on your controller. And then there's, like, dragon limb targeting, where, like, you are able to attack the leg of the dragon, and if you get it down low enough, it'll be like the dragon hurt its leg, so it'll be like, it'll have trouble walking around, it'll tuck its leg underneath of itself, or, like, you damage its wing, and all of a sudden it can't fly, and I'm like, that's cool. Like, I like that you're going further. The Dragon Age game is going to be playing on the Frostbite 3 engine, which will also be powering the next Mass Effect game. Now, we're going to start talking about some disappointing things. Because one of the things, if you've seen my We Talk episode about the preview to E3, you would know that one of the things that I was most excited about was the announcement of the next Mass Effect game. Because Mass Effect 3, first of all, the entire Mass Effect trilogy was a game. It is games that are really important to me. Like, I loved it. It changed the way I look at RPGs forever. And, you know, their ability to storytell is absolutely amazing, and I loved how impactful a lot of the choices were. Mass Effect 3 being amongst my most favorite game ever. And I know that's not the same for everybody, because everybody still has a bad taste in their mouth from the original endings, but I was happy with the extended cut endings that they released. Like, they realized that they made a mistake. They didn't have it as, like, you know, in detail as much as they wanted to. Like, it wasn't as satisfying, and I thought the extended cut endings definitely satisfied what I feel like that's what they wanted to do. They just didn't have enough time to do it because EA was like, we gotta get your game out now. But they started talking about the next Mass Effect game. They were like, we want you to do new things, meet new people, go to new places. I'm like, yeah, that's what I would expect you to do. I wouldn't want you to be going back to the same places. Like, I mean, I would like to return to the Citadel and stuff. Like, I'm not saying that, but it's like, give us, like, new stuff. Like, have us meet new people. I don't want to be doing the same thing. But I was like, I was hoping that they'd be, like, giving, like, a little bit of a cinematic tease. Like, they would at least give us an idea of what the game's about. A title to call it, since we're not allowed to call it Mass Effect 4. And then they were like, basically, and this is, I swear to God, this is, like, what they did. We're working on the next Mass Effect game, but we know you know that. And we're here to tell you that we're working on the next Mass Effect game. That's it. I was like, what? That's it? And then they moved on. It was like, I feel as unsatisfied as I was when I saw the original endings of Mass Effect 3. I'm like, was that it? Like, that didn't give me any answers. That didn't do anything. That was so disappointing. First of all, you didn't even have a cinematic trailer, not even a CGI trailer that you could have released. I was like, why? EA was able to pound out a Battlefront cinematic CGI teaser weeks after acquiring the rights to actually develop it. And you're telling me a game that has been in development for 2 years hasn't had any preparation into a cinematic trailer that could at least give us some idea of what the game is generally about? All we know is that we're going to be doing new things. And then BioWare started like, oh, we're also working on, like, the Mass Effect team is also working on a brand new IP, which, again, is suggesting to me, like, I thought the Mass Effect team would have worked on the next Knights of the Old Republic game, but I'm like, it's a brand new IP, so I guess that's not Knights of the Old Republic. So I'm like, what are you guys working on? Unless it's a new type of Star Wars game, I mean, like, that'd be cool. But again, they were like, alright, here's some trees, there's the day cycle, there you go. So not only did we not really get a Mass Effect tease, we got a tease into a BioWare new IP that we know nothing about. We generally walked into that the same exact way we walked back out of it. The only thing I'm gonna give credit somewhere. Because they showed off with the Mass Effect tease, like they showed off a model with N7 armor. They showed off a Krogan, And I'm like, okay, so that's suggesting that the Mass Effect game is sort of taking in the general time frame that the main trilogy was. Like, it's not a Prothean prequel. I think I was actually hoping that we would see a different type of Mass Effect game, like maybe not role play, maybe more like actiony and stuff. Not saying that we should get away from the role playing. I'm actually happy that we're doing a role play, but I thought that they would have at least tried something new. And I thought that eventually they were going to get around to doing a Prothean prequel, like the Protheans fight against the Reapers and what all went down with that. And so what they showed is showing that it's taking place, I think, before, because I don't think they're going to do anything after, because I think the endings of Mass Effect 3 are so vast and so different that it's going to be really hard to have like a set like ending, sort of, because they don't want to have a set ending. And I think that that's going to be like a really hard mountain to climb in terms of like what is it that we want out of the Mass Effect games, and what the ending of Mass Effect 3 was. So I don't think it's going to take place after, especially since we're not allowed to call it Mass Effect 3. So I think it's going to take place, I don't know if it's exactly during the same, like with the trilogy, or maybe taking slightly before the main trilogy. I don't actually know, but the N7 armor and the Krogan proving that it's not going to be like a Prothean thing. That's the only thing we know, though. So I'm like, we're walking in to this BioWare thing, and we're walking back out almost the exact same, other than 2 pieces of information that BioWare's working on a new IP, and that Mass Effect is not a Prothean prequel. That's all we know. So I'm like, what the hell? EA would spend a lot more of its time just talking about sports, which I understand a lot of people may actually be interested in. I unfortunately am not. And so they took a break in the middle of it to talk about a new MOBA called Dawngate, and showing off some Mirror's Edge footage. Still not calling it Mirror's Edge 2. I guess it's a Mirror's Edge reboot. But they're showing, I guess it's new footage. But not really new. Because it's not like we're seeing anything new. We're just seeing the same thing, just different. If you get what I'm saying. They all wrapped it all up with the Battlefield Hardline multiplayer and the surprise closed beta that went live. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get into it because I guess everybody flooded the same place at the same time. And I was like, man, my computer's not having it today. So I didn't actually get into the beta, but later on they would talk about Hardline. They would show a trailer at Sony and how like there are some exclusivity with Sony. Like you actually go on the beta with the PlayStation 4 and the PC. Just basically you cannot allow to have the beta on the Xbox. But Battlefield Hardline is about cops and robbers, and they explain that. And I think that's going to be basically, this game looks like a Battlefield game. It looks like a war military shooter. But it's about cops and robbers, even though it still looks like a military shooter. It's like over the top, like it's taking it to an unnecessary extreme, and I'm like, I didn't want that. Like, I understand, like, if you want a game like that, you can play Payday, but I don't know, it's like taking it to like a super extreme, and basically all Hardline is, I guess, is going to be affecting its story mode and also affecting its some game modes that are in the multiplayer. But again, it's like, it still looks like a military shooter. Like, it's still like a shoot 'em. It's a first-person shooter. It's like Call of Duty and Battlefield. But I'm like, I don't know if it's a bad thing or a good thing. Like, hey, it looked good. I'm not saying it looked bad. I just kind of want to see more, get some opinions on people that are actually experiencing the beta. Because I know a couple of people that have gotten into the beta, and I'm going to get their inputs from them. Because I haven't played it. The only thing I saw, and I'm like, that wasn't really what I expected to see. So EA had a very unbalanced press conference. Like, they talked about everything in the beginning that was halfway interesting. They wrapped it up with a thing that was interesting, and then the entire time in the middle was just So, going on to Ubisoft's press conference, we're almost done. I know we're a half hour into this video, but we're almost done. And by almost done, I mean halfway. So they talked about Ubisoft's press conference. They opened up with a Far Cry 4 demo, showing the first 5 minutes of the game, introducing the villain of the game, Pagan Min, played by Troy Baker. And I gotta tell you, the first 5 minutes of this game, totally awesome. Like, first of all, Far Cry 3 had a fantastic villain and boss, but Far Cry 4's Pagan Min is just like, he's sort of like similar to Voss, where it's like he's calm, he's cool, he's collected, but then he loses his shit and everything, and I'm like, this guy is absolutely like awesome, and I think like, he's just gonna make the game. And he's just, and then they showed off some gameplay of the game during the Sony press conference, basically showing some of the new mechanics that come with the game. Like, they didn't show riding elephants, but I saw an advertisement on YouTube after the fact that there was rideable elephants. They showed a lot of cool stuff with, like, you're able to shoot from the cars, like It's not some of the cool stuff, but it's definitely cool that they've added that in. But like, you know how like the guy was like driving on a bridge, and then he drives off the bridge, jumps out of the car, wingsuits on into an outpost, attacks the outpost. Then he has his friend come in from co-op. He's driving like this helicopter thing, and they basically go into this outpost. You see all these elephants charging in. They're ramming jeeps and shit, and I'm like, that looks awesome. Like the Himalayas, I think the setting is awesome. I think that what they're doing with the game is awesome. It looks good. And it's also a sequel to one of the most beloved first-person shooters ever. And definitely one of my more favorites. It's the best shooter of 2012. So I was very interested in that. And there are also some co-op perks that come with the PlayStation 4, like, which is definitely cool, where, let's say, for example, I have Far Cry 4 and I'm playing, and I want to invite one of my friends who doesn't have Far Cry 4. As long as they have a PlayStation 4, I can invite them to the game, and they can play co-op with me, even though they don't have the game. I thought that was awesome. Ubisoft will go into some of the crew details, which is definitely cool. I think that game is going to be awesome. Definitely, you know, Forza 5, or Forza. I still don't know how to actually pronounce that. That game introduced me to racing games, and I think the crew definitely interests me. So I'm like, you know what? If there was ever another racing game I would buy, the crew would definitely be it. And then we're going to get into Assassin's Creed Unity here. They showed off a cinematic trailer with some gameplay. They didn't show anything of the co-op. They talked about it a little bit after the fact. But I'm going to tell you something that happened during the gameplay. Well, first of all, before I start ripping this thing apart, I would say, like, Assassin's Creed Unity's, there are some benefits with it, where, like, there's some down parkour. One of the negatives of Assassin's Creed was, like, you're able to climb up the buildings very nicely, but basically when it comes out to going down the buildings, you basically jump off. Or you could jump down the lower buildings before you can jump off. Or you do a leap of faith. So, like, the parkour down is definitely cool. They're getting away from tailing missions. That was one of the big negatives about Black Flag, was like every time you were on land, you were in a tailing mission of some kind. They said that they were getting away from it, that they were going to do other things like, you know, you would intercept letters or interrogate people to get information to find out where somebody is going. They didn't actually say that they were completely getting rid of the tailing missions, just that they were getting away from it. Basically telling me we're doing less of it. You know, with the thing in the gameplay, I'm like, yes, the gameplay looks smooth. I think the setting in this game is amazing. Like, the French Revolution is so different from the American Revolution. Like, it was more gruesome, it was more bloody, it was more like, ah. And I think that was awesome. In a game about killing people, I think that totally fits. And the game looks good. Like, I'm not saying the game looks bad. But then they got into a part of the demo where the guy was fighting, and he was fighting one of those like brute types, and all we're seeing is the guy parrying, the enemy's parrying, he's doing like this like leg sweep motion, and it's missing, and I'm like, so this game's combat mechanics, which has been one of the big negatives about the Assassin's Creed series, has not changed at all. It's still as redundant as ever. Then I find out, I didn't hear this in an interview, but I found out about this from people talking about it, the cooperative gameplay is completely replacing the cooperative multiplayer. And to which I'm like, what? Why are you doing that? I thought the Assassin's Creed multiplayer, while the same since its initial release, has definitely been something that was different. It was cool, it was fun, and I loved playing it. You know, but it's like, you're getting rid of it now? That's a dumb move. So, basically, Assassin's Creed Unity, getting rid of some of the things that make Assassin's Creed good, except for the tailing missions, because that shit. But it's like, no! Oh, I was so disappointed with that announcement. With the details about Assassin's Creed Unity, it's just like, I expected, like, Black Flag to have rejuvenated everybody. Like, okay, now I'm willing to give Unity a try. And in that demo, I was just like, you're not changing. First of all, the big negative about Assassin's Creed is the combat. You didn't change anything about that. The only thing you change is the ability to free run, which I guess is kind of a negative, but I'm not really 100% certain that they've completely fixed it. Like, they've completely made it perfect. I don't think they're ever going to get it perfect, actually, because it's been the same for forever. And then it's just like, this cooperative multiplayer is replacing the competitive multiplayer, and I'm like, stop doing that. Oh, I was very disappointed about that. I am not going to be buying Assassin's Creed Unity. I will be renting it, because I would like to experience it. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll rent it. If it's good, then I'll buy it. If it's not, then screw it. They spent a lot of time with some shape-up gameplay, which is like the fitness kind of thing, and I'm like, alright, I don't really care about this at all. And they wrapped it all up with Rainbow Six Siege gameplay, which was really cool. Like, Rainbow Six Siege is the next Rainbow game. one of the big highlighting modes of this game is the siege mode, and I thought that looks really cool. Like, I was like, you know, the only negative about it is just like, well, first of all, let me talk about the positives before I start talking about the negatives. Is that, you know, the gameplay is definitely cool. It definitely is very cooperative. It's forcing people to be cooperative, and I think that that's really cool. And it just looks like the destructible environment is awesome, except for the fact that it made the house seem like paper mache. Like, I get it, a shotgun will blow a hole in drywall, but I don't know if the house should be that destructive. Like, it shouldn't be that easy to break down a wall just by shooting at it with a regular gun. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I've never actually shot a gun inside of a house before, so I'm like, I don't actually know what would happen, and I just feel like it's like cannonballs are going through like the walls and stuff, and I'm like, would that actually happen? I don't know. But I like how like there are different classes. Like, this guy can place down cover, and this guy's able to do something here, this guy's able to do something here. The basic idea of Siege is that there are defenders and there are attackers. The defenders are like the terrorists, and they have like a hostage inside of a house. The attackers are choosing their entryway. They can come in from the street, they can come in from the garage, they can come in from the roof. And I'm like, you know, watching it, and they're basically trying to rescue the attacker, or I'm sorry, the hostage. And I'm like, this is definitely cool. Like, I was happy with what we saw. I think a lot of people were also very happy with what they saw about Rainbow Six Siege. Definitely one of the best games that I've seen at the show. So, gonna wrap it all up with Sony here. Actually, I totally forgot. We have to talk about Nintendo. So we're not up actually halfway through. We're probably more than halfway through right now. Anyway, Sony gets on the stage. They open this thing up with Destiny, with the story trailer. And then they basically said, like, the game's going to be coming out in September. And then they were like, but if you want to play the game sooner than that, the beta is going to be coming to the PlayStation 4. And then the alpha, sooner than that, it's going to be coming to the PlayStation 4. And you're also going to get a white PS4 with the Destiny bundle. And I'm like, is that all the exclusivity that this game has? Like, I get there is some content exclusivity with the game as well. Like, but the game is just like, man, it is such in the house of Sony. It's like, I am so not interested in Destiny at this point. I said before that, like, if this game was going to win me over, it was going to be during its multiplayer. And they showed off the multiplayer, and I'm like, I can't tell you there's so many different ways that, you know, Destiny just looks the same as ever. I get, like, I can already hear people saying, like, oh, Rick, but you just said that Call of Duty shouldn't change anything and that Assassin's Creed shouldn't change anything, but then you're talking about Destiny not, you know, is being like a first-person shooter, and, you know, they look similar to Call of Duty, but blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, but this is a brand new IP. It should feel different. Like, for example, yes, there is, like, a line that needs to be met, like an expectation that needs to be met with first-person shooters. They're all going to look similar. Battlefield, Call of Duty, and Titanfall, they all look similar because of their first-person shooter aspect. But the games feel drastically different from each other. Call of Duty is very, like, closed in, sort of like you gather points and stuff, and it doesn't feel like a simulator. Battlefield is a lot more of a larger scale. It has vehicles, has destructible environments. It feels more closer to a military simulator than perhaps a Call of Duty game would. And then Titanfall is also completely different because it has Titans, it has, like, the parkouring, the verticality, and the movements are very different. The games feel drastically different. Destiny is not different. It seems like something we have played before. It looks like, because, I don't know if it was because of Bungie that I thought about this, because I'm like, okay, there are some vehicles, but the mechanics are, it just looks like a Halo with the ability to aim down the sights. That's what it feels like. And I'm like, I'm really not interested in seeing that. It's just, like, definitely not a type of gameplay that I'm interested in, and it just seems very samey to me. Like, I expect a new IP to be different. I'm not going to play a game's multiplayer that seems the same as another game's multiplayer. As long as the games in that franchise are somewhat similar, I can forgive it. But, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that it's a bad shooter. I'm just saying it's not interesting enough for me. And I wasn't interested in the game's single-player experience anyway. It just seems like Borderlands. So, again, Destiny being the most expensively made game ever, definitely not something I'm going to be playing, because I'm just... No, it didn't sell me. It didn't sell me. The Order 1886 gameplay, we seen a little bit more. We would get more details and some more gameplay. Actually, later on after the press conference, they would see some gameplay. I don't know if it was an extended version of stuff that we have already seen. It just looks similar to what we've already seen. I will say this about the Order 1886. It is a game that I wish I could play. It's a game that I wish was not an exclusive so I could play it. It looks gorgeous. It looks gorgeous. And I'm sure that it's story is definitely immersive, but here's the thing. Is that the gameplay just doesn't seem like gameplay. There's no playing a game. It's like, shoot twice, cutscene. Shine a light over here, cutscene. Walk forward 3 steps, cutscene. I'm like, was that the best thing to show? I'm glad that they showed what I'm assuming is a werewolf. And I'm glad that they showed the supernatural aspect that is coming with the Order 1886. But I was like, oh man, that is not a good showing. Like, the game looks gorgeous. Again, the game looks gorgeous. And it's another game that's going to make me say, like, okay, if I was going to buy a PlayStation 4, the Order 1886 would be a game I would want to grab. But again, it's just like, man, oh man, I'm glad we got more details on it, because that was one of the things that I wanted out of E3. I kept thinking to myself, like, oh man, I know nothing about the Order 1886, and we got more information on it, so I was like, oh, cool. So, I'm glad about that. Not really, I mean, like, there's some negatives there. Infamous Second Son is, well, actually, I'm wrong. It's not a DLC for Infamous Second Son. It's just a standalone DLC for Infamous called First Life, starring a female protagonist. Infamous Second Son, a game that I will also, if I got a PlayStation 4, I would get Second Son. And I assume Infamous First Life, it will be the same thing, because it looks like it's sort of like how Blood Dragon was with Far Cry 3, where it's just like, it's in the same engine, it plays the same way. It's just not, you don't need to have the game to play it. Then they showed off Little Big Planet 3. It was a big surprise to everybody. I will say this about their demo. It was very entertaining. But, man oh man, did the demonstration make the game look like shit. Honestly, they were like, it's supposed to be a platformer, but it's like, the characters are sitting there and they're not even able to make a jump. The people who made the game are having trouble with playing the game. And I'm like, that demo is so bad. Like, you guys are doing a horrible job. Like, the one girl took her like 3 or 4 tries just to wall jump up. And I'm like, God, man, you make your game look really, like, sloppy. And you have a... Oh, man, it was bad. It was cringe-worthy. It was funny, but it was cringe. It was cringe-worthy. They went into No Man's Sky, and we got more details about it after the press conference. But, man, No Man's Sky looks, to me, it's the face of next-gen. Like, the seamlessness of being on a planet, flying up into space, then flying back down to another planet. I was like, man, oh man, oh man. I had my hopes with this game. Like, the way they talk about it, it's like a huge, huge scale. And I'm like, man, that looks awesome. And it's like how, like, on the planet there's, like, alien life and wildlife, and there's, like, they showed, like, aquatic life, and I'm like, this game looks frigging awesome. Then they went up into space, and you see, like, space stations and alien ships, and I'm like, okay, there's advanced life, and then they were like, we're gonna fly down over here, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And then they said that the game was gonna have, like, combat mechanics. Like, they showed off the ship has, like, lasers and stuff, and how, like, you know, on the planet there was like a shooting mechanic. I hope that they get a little bit more into that. Like, I want to be able to like go into space stations and have like all first person shooter, like shooting up mercenaries and stuff, but the game still gives me freedom to do whatever it is I want. I'd be totally happy if like the game has like a lore, like it has like a backstory, but doesn't force me to follow along with the story. Kind of like what Skyrim did, where like there is a story that you can pursue, but you don't have to pursue it. I hope that the game gives me that much freedom, and I hope with the scale of which the game is, you know, being hinted at being, like how every player is going to start on their own planet, and I'm like, that's amazing, and I'm just like, it blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind with No Man's Sky, and I'm so excited for that. I don't think it's a PlayStation, I think it's going to be experienced first on the PlayStation 4. I don't know if it's going to be coming over to the Xbox, but I think they talked about PC. But, man, if it's only on PlayStation 4, that is a hell of an exclusive. I don't think it is, though. I think it's going to be available on the PlayStation, or on the, PC. And then, I laugh every time I want to say something negative. I don't know if you've noticed. They talked about PlayStation Camera. It was basically leading into Project Morpheus, but, man, they had to take an unnecessary stab at Microsoft, didn't they? They talked about the PlayStation Camera, and the guy comes out and he goes, the PlayStation Camera has been available at launch and always has been an optional feature. And everybody's like, yeah! And I'm like, F you. Why did you have to take that unnecessary stab? That makes you seem so unprofessional. It's childish now. Microsoft knew that they made a mistake with a lot of the things that they did. They reversed the always online, they reversed the digital only, and they basically reversed a lot of stuff. And then they said that the Kinect wasn't gonna, you can actually get the PlayStation, or I'm sorry, you can actually get the Xbox One without the Kinect and for $100 cheaper. And again, it's just like Sony was like, hey, our camera's been available from launch as an optional feature. And I'm like, shut up, go sit in the corner. God, you guys are so unprofessional. This basically led off into what I call the bathroom break, where they're just talking about features I just don't care about. Man, oh man, it really wasn't that. It was so uninteresting. It was like for over 15 minutes. And then they went into Powers, which is a TV series, or a PlayStation TV series, and it's based on a comic book of the same name. And apparently, man, people are not happy about this. I couldn't tell you how uninterested I was in this, but it's like PlayStation is bashing on Microsoft for making mistakes with TV, and then they turn around and they're like, hey, we got TV too, and I'm like, you guys are behind the ball on this. Microsoft did it, they tried it, they didn't work out, and now you guys are like, hey, we got to catch up, so that's not cool anymore? And you guys are idiots. Stop, just sit in the corner. And then they went on the Ratchet and Clank, the movie, and then they announced the game, but they didn't show anything about the game, and I'm like, more stuff I don't care about. And then they showed The Last of Us Remastered, and this was a mistake. I'm not saying that the announcement of The Last of Us Remastered was a bad thing. It was all something everybody was expecting. But here's the thing. The trailer that they showed, while it looked good, had spoilers in it at an E3 press conference. Are you an idiot? Are you an idiot? Why do you include spoilers in The Last of Us? Like, why do you include spoilers in anything? Yes, the game's been out for a year, but holy crap, what are you doing, you idiots? Like, people are going to be sitting there and they're like, I want to hold out for The Last of Us because the PlayStation 4 is around the corner and they may do a remastered version. Oh, nope, spoilers. Okay. I'm not even going to talk about the spoilers here because I'm not even going to tell you what they showed, but man, they showed some spoilers. And the trailer was designed in a way that, like, you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to include those snippets of the spoilers. Like, you could have easily have taken it out. Are you stupid? Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Oh, that was dumb. They showed up Metal Gear Solid 5. They had the Phantom Pain. Metal Gear Solid 5, the Phantom Pain. They showed a trailer for it, which definitely looked cool. And then they announced that Grand Theft Auto 5 was going to be coming to the PlayStation 4. What they didn't talk about was that it was also going to be coming for the Xbox One and PC. The only thing that they had there for Sony was Sony had the right to actually announce it. They showed off some Batman Arkham Knight gameplay, which looked cool. I've never jumped into the Arkham games as many times as many people have been telling me to do it. Arkham Knight looks really good. I talked about this again with Greg from the Game Boat. While the game looked good and it makes the city feel alive, like I think that was one of the negatives for Arkham City, was like the city just felt dead. They introduced the Batmobile, and then like driving through and the things like wrecking house, like destroying things and stuff, and then all of a sudden it turns into a tank. Has like guns on the side and shooting at bad guys and blowing up their vehicles, and I'm like, so people are dying, right? So not only is Batman using a gun, which he doesn't do because guns killed his parents, but he's killing people. Batman doesn't kill people because people killed his parents. And I'm like, for people that have been high on the Batman lore and everything, you know really nothing about what you're doing here, do you? And I'm like, I'm not saying the game's not going to be fun. I will possibly give the game a look. No, I will give the game a look. It's not a possibility. I will give the game a look. It will be the first Arkham game that I play. That's not true. I might play another one before that. But, man, it looked good. They would all wrap it up with the Uncharted 4 A Thief's End trailer. I originally looked at this and I was like, so that game tells us nothing other than, you know, Uncharted 4, A Thief's End. Here's a trailer. But I found out later it's actually in-engine cutscene. It was captured from a PlayStation 4. So I'm impressed. Like, Naughty Dog does really good job. And I will say this, the PlayStation 4 has some games out there that look smooth. They look good. And games that I would want to play. Like, I would get The Last of Us Remastered. I would play Uncharted 4. And I would play on No Man's Sky. I would play the infamous First Light. I would play the Order 1886. That's what I wanted out of the Sony's press conference, was games, more look into games that I would want to experience. And Sony did that. Like, not saying that they had a bad press conference. They had some missteps. It was unbalanced in certain areas. They didn't have a bad press conference. They didn't have an EA press conference. Then we would get into the Nintendo press conference, and they had like a digital presentation. And I will say this about Nintendo: they had a very entertaining intro, very awkward intro where they had like a weird fight scene. But it was just like, it was good. It was good, and it was entertaining. And throughout the entire thing, they had like this like robot chicken style kind of thing, and I thought that was very entertaining. It was definitely something cool to watch. But they led off with Smash Brothers announcing the Mii Fighter. They talked about amiibos, which are the little figurines you put on the Wii U to impact, Smash Brothers. Apparently, it's going to be coming to games like Mario Kart 8. They said that they would talk more about it in another video, and then they went into some of their games. They talked about Yoshi's Woolly World. They showed off some gameplay and some co-op. They talked about Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, showed a trailer for that, and then Kirby and the Rainbow Curse gameplay, as well as Mario Maker gameplay. And I'm like, okay, so those are all indie games, right? I feel like Nintendo, that's the quality of their games. Like, they're indie caliber games, and I'm like, that's not, oh god, man. Here's the thing with Nintendo, it's just like, they're proving time and time again that it's just like, not so much proving it, but it's just like, they're showing that it's just like, they're still creating games for a world that has outgrown them in a way. Like, Nintendo is just, it needs to wake up, man. They're doing not good, man. I really was interested in almost nothing. There were some things I was interested in. Like, if I had a Wii U, I would be playing Smash Brothers, because I love Smash Brothers. There would be another game that I'm going to talk about right now called The Legend of Zelda. I love The Legend of Zelda. It is one of the games that holds a special place in my heart. It's definitely one of the games that have introduced me to gaming. And the first Legend of Zelda game I ever played was Majora's Mask. One of my more favorite games ever. Ocarina of Time would come up shortly after that. I played Wind Waker, I played Twilight Princess. Those are the only real Zelda games I played. I played some of the Game Boy ones, but I don't remember what the name of it was. And then we showed this new next Legend of Zelda game. Like, they're showing off, like, I'm not sure if it was actually gameplay footage. It looked like gameplay, but it was just like, the game's a lot more open world than it has been. Like, I mean, the game has always been like an open world kind of thing, but not as open as the way that they're making it sound right here. And it has like this like weird art style. I'm not saying it's weird, I mean like it's a different art style. Kind of like Wind Waker, but not so cartoony. And it's just like, a lot of people are upset by this. Like, first of all, when they actually showed, it was like, I'm assuming it's Link, but it looks like a girl. And I was like sitting there, and they jump off the horse, and they spin around with the arrow, and the bow and arrow, and I'm like, is that a girl? And I'm thinking to myself, what if the next Legend of Zelda game stars a girl? And I'm like, I would totally be behind that. Like, I would totally play a Legend of Zelda game that would be starring somebody who's not Link for once. But then I thought to myself, there's no way. Because then they turned, and I was like, yeah, it looks like Link. I mean, it still looks like a girl, but it still looks like Link, too. And I'm like, yeah, they wouldn't do a Legend of Zelda game without Link, because Link is such an iconic character. And, a lot of people were upset by this, but I think I'm so far out of the game with Nintendo, I don't really understand why people are upset by it. I mean, it looked good. It seemed good. I think that what they were talking about was good, but anyway, that's Nintendo for you. I'm not going to be playing it because I haven't owned anything Nintendo since the GameCube. They showed off Splatoon, which had a very interesting mechanic. I thought that this game has a showing, and one of the better games that we've seen at E3, and it was a surprise because it was a Nintendo press conference. Splatoon is like a shooter. It's like a kids kind of shooter. It's 4v4, and you basically go in, and the whole idea of it is to totally you have an ink gun, and your goal is to spray this ink all over the place and control the most area. Whoever has the control of the most area at the end of the game would win. And it has an interesting mechanic where you can actually turn into a squid and swim really fast in your own ink. But if you hit like enemies' ink, you walk really slow. But it shows like there's some strategy here. Like you can turn into a squid, hide in your own ink so that when an enemy comes up, you can ambush them. And they talked about different game modes, but not really. Like it was more like they asked if there would be more game modes, and then they were like, well, we only have the one, but we're entertaining the idea of doing more. And I'm like, okay, so there's more to this game that has yet to be determined, and, if the game only has, like, one game mode, it's going to get old, and it's going to get old fast, but I thought it was cool. It was definitely had a good showing. They wrapped it all up with introducing a new Smash Brothers character. They talked about the Invitational and the Smash Fest. Later on, they would announce Pac-Man for Super Smash Brothers, but basically, they opened with Super Smash Brothers, they ended with Super Smash Brothers, they showed off some of their games, the platforming games that, honestly, I don't care about. Showed off a new Legend of Zelda game, which was cool, and, you know, if I was still playing Nintendo platforms, I would definitely be into it. And then they showed off Platoon, which, again, would be something I would definitely be into. So that wraps up all the press conferences. I want to talk about two things that were not at the press conferences first before we wrap up this hour-long episode of We Talk, which is the. But not at the press conferences was Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor. They had like again, I watched IGN throughout the entirety of E3, and they had a 20-minute demo showing off some of the really awesome-looking combat mechanics. I mean, the game still has similarities to AC. Like, I originally watched the trailer, and I'm like, oh, the guy just did a leap of faith. And then I panicked. I was like, oh, this game's too close to Assassin's Creed. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, well, you know, Titanfall looks similar to Call of Duty. And, you know, games, they don't have to be a direct ripoff. It's just taking inspiration from games that have done well. And, you know, I thought Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, its combat looked frigging awesome. The game looks good. They had this Nemesis trailer, the Nemesis system trailer, that made it look really generic. Like, it was like the same thing. Like, the guy would fight, they would cross swords, and then the enemy would be like, I didn't know I kill you before. And I'm like, yeah, no. And it was the same thing over and over. Like, it was back to back. Like, they would do the same thing. They wouldn't say the same thing, but they would look the same way. And I'm like, oh, so it's in danger of being generic. But then I actually saw this 20-minute demo, and it was more spread out. Like, the guy gets killed by this random orc, and because he gets killed by the random orc, the orc then gets, like, a morale boost, and he goes and challenges this other orc. He kills him, takes his spot as a captain, and I'm like, oh, I see what this Nemesis system is really doing. Like, you're not going to see this, like, cross swords back to back to back to back to back. The reason why it looked generic is because it was back to back to back to back. Although, I do wish that it was more like, if the enemy sees you, he says something. Like, it doesn't have to trigger a cutscene, but it's more like, hey, didn't I kill you before? You cut off my arm, or something like that. Apparently, they all have an accent like that. But, I like, it's in danger of being generic, but it's not that bad, even if it is like that. I mean, like, the game is definitely something that's going to, like, I think it's going to be a huge inspiration because of the way it's going to be designing and programming its AI. It'll, like I said, it takes inspiration from AC, but I think in the long run, Shadow of Mordor is going to be inspiration to other titles, and I thought that was pretty cool. Another game that got a gameplay trailer, not trailer, demo. This is an hour-long video, and I am already losing, forgetting how to, obviously, I'm forgetting how to talk, even when I'm trying to tell you that I'm forgetting how to talk. They showed off Alien Isolation gameplay and told us more details. This game, every time I see this game, I know I say this all the time, but every time I see this game, I am impressed, and I am happy with what I'm hearing. Alien Isolation had like a 10-minute demo, basically showing, you know, some of the mechanics that we haven't seen before. More notable is, like, the different enemies. Like, there are other humans in this abandoned ship. I think it's a ship. It could be a space station, but I think it's a ship. And they're, like, other survivors that are afraid of the alien. They're trying to do their own thing, and you have to, like, craft items in order to survive, like an EMP, because you had to deal with that, with this creepy-ass looking android that you would see later in the demo. And, man, this game it reminds me of Outlast, and Outlast was a really good horror game. It did things right, where there were some areas where horror and jump scares weren't going to be able to be predicted, because it was more, like, randomized, because the enemy was, like, patrolling around. And, you know, I'm going to make a lot of comparisons with Outlast here, because in Outlast, there's this one enemy. He's a big dude, he's all bloody, he's all muscular, he's got, like, this weird teeth, and he calls you Little Pig. For people who played Outlast, they know exactly who I'm talking about. People who don't know that there's a big scary dude that follows you around, and he comes and tries to kill you all the time. To me, that big guy is like the alien in Alien Isolation. And the other humans are the patients that are in this insane asylum in Outlast. And I was like, okay, so there are similarities there. Like, some of them won't attack you. Some of them also may be helpful to you. Others will come after you and they will attack you. And I think that, you know, the android was like one of those moments of, like, first of all, the android looked creepy as hell. Like, man, there was one instance where they're, like, trying to hack a computer, and because it was, like, really tense, all of a sudden the music goes, and then the alien, or the android comes in and punches you, and then the game, here's what I like about Alien Isolation that I wish Outlast had, was, like, an ability to at least fight back. There are a lot of times in Outlast where I get attacked by an enemy and I'm like, dude, just hit him with the camera or punch him or kick him or do something. Like, God, I mean, I'm not a fighter, but I'd be willing to kick the guy or punch him in the face. He'll back off. Alien Isolation gives you the ability to fight back, which is something that I think affects like the realism of, you know, being in a situation like that. Like, you will attack somebody if your back is up against the wall. And you know, they showed off like the gun and like how noise was a factor. Like, even though, you know, it's like, will it attract the alien and stuff, or will it attract other people? And I'm like, this is definitely something that is really cool. I'm loving what I'm hearing about I would say Assassin's Creed with Alien Isolation. Every time I see it, it is just impressive. And, you know, I'm really excited for this game, and I believe it comes out on October 7th. It was either Middle Earth Shadow of Mordor, Dragon Age Inquisition, and Alien Isolation. They were all going to be coming out on October 7th, but I think one of them moved to the 5th. I remember which one it was, or if any of them actually did. Maybe I'm just completely making stuff up. Anyway, so that was what I thought about this year's E3. It was the basic idea, all the cool things that happened, all the things that interested me, all the things I felt like were even worth addressing. What did you guys think of E3? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys for watching this super long episode of We Talk, and I will see you next time.